Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 14 Pro has been out for a little over 3 months, and this is probably the one I would recommend for most people, given its overall size and more. So we'll talk about the design, size, weight, durability, scratches after 3 months or so. We'll talk about battery and more, of course. And so I have my iPhone 14 Pro here on the left. This is my wife's phone that she uses full time, and I have my 14 Pro that I record a lot of video with. This is the deep purple version, and I record a lot of shorts with this when I have the 14 Pro Max in the frame. So this is actually used as a video camera a lot of the time. All of my TikTok videos, Instagram, and more are recorded with this camera typically. And so the overall design is perfect for most people. Given its size with a case on it, I think this is the best size. I often find myself wanting to go from the 14 Pro Max to the 14 Pro because it's easier to hold, it's better for one-handed operation, and just seems to be best for most people. The 14 Pro Max is my choice, mostly because the screen is larger and it's easier for me to read. And so that's typically why I choose the 14 Pro Max, although there's other reasons to consider the larger phone as well. But for most people, I would recommend this size. And as far as the design goes, well, this is just a progression of what we had with the iPhone 12 series. So if I remove this case here for now, the deep purple color is really nice, of course, and then we have our typical camera bump that's been increasing over time. So the stainless steel construction is very premium, and with a case on it, it doesn't really scratch or anything like that. You can see it's held up really well, and of course, without a case, they typically hold up well, but they will scuff and scratch on the bottom, typically, if you have it in a case that leaves the ports open. Otherwise, they hold up very, very well. Without a screen protector with ceramic shield, it holds up well also, but this one does have a screen protector. My 14 Pro Max does not, and I don't have a single scratch on it. Whether that's a light scratch or dark scratch, it really seems to hold up very, very well. So no complaints there, very durable, and if you drop them, unless it's on a very hard surface and you hit a rock or something like that, they tend to hold up very well over time. Now, before we move on to battery life, you may have noticed a new case in some of my recent videos, and CaseCoo is the sponsor of this video. This is the CaseCoo Magic Stand case. It comes in clear blue or matching deep purple or space black colors. It's a protective case that adds grip and looks great, providing a raised bezel around the screen and camera, but also has a hidden stand built in. The stand allows for a 40 to 120 degree angle and has a magnet in the ring of the stand that supports MagSafe accessories and charging. I really like the look of them, they feel premium and seem to protect everything really well. So I'll link them in the description below. The number one reason a lot of people decide to go with the 14 Pro Max over the 14 Pro is typically battery life. However, my wife really hasn't complained about battery at all. So if we take a look at her battery life here, we'll just go into settings, and within settings, we'll go to battery and then battery health and charging. You'll see it's at 100%, and the overall battery health is holding up pretty well. Based off Coconut battery, we have about 71 cycle count for the charge cycles. So that's pretty good, 100%. And if we take a look at her battery life overall, you'll see yesterday she had 3 hours and 54 minutes of screen active time, 2 hours and 34 minutes of screen idle time, and used about 80% of her battery. Now, depending on the day, of course, it's going to vary greatly. She's not a very heavy user of her phone. She's on an iPad most of the time, but you can see here the overall usage, using the home screen and lock screen and music. And she also has the always-on display turned on, so you can see that's active here, and she doesn't have the wallpaper itself blacked out for the always-on display. So I would say 6 hours of battery life is pretty typical of screen on time. No, it's not the 10 hours plus you'll get with a 14 Pro Max, but it gets most people through the day if they're not heavy users. So no issues there, and this is charged every single night on a charging stand, MagSafe compatible charging stand, and it just charges the phone. No issues there, and that's what we have. So really no complaints. I haven't heard her say once that it was a problem. Now, as far as the display is one of the best parts of this phone. It's the same quality display that we get on the 14 Pro Max that goes up to 120 Hertz, has very smooth ProMotion, and also can ramp down to 1 Hertz with the always-on display. So with that always-on display, it dims and uses much less power. Of course, you can turn off the always-on display, but it's something I really like. And as far as PWM, well, PWM is something that can bother a lot of people's eyes by the way it controls brightness, flickering the screen faster or slower depending on the overall brightness level. And this phone really doesn't bother me at all. In fact, Notebook Check found that it actually uses what appears to be DC dimming above 39% brightness. So if you have it really low, it's going to be flickering, but anything above 39%, it appears to use what's close to DC dimming, so it's not really flickering as much as you can actually tell with your eyes. So that's something where it can really bother your eyes. This doesn't do that at all for me. I never have the brightness way down though, and that certainly helps. So if you keep it above that 39%, I really don't think it's going to bother your eyes at all. Now, when it comes to the cameras are really great this year. They have ProRes, of course. They have cinematic mode. You also have that 48 megapixel camera with ProRes. And I've shown that in multiple videos with different comparisons. And it does seem to be really, really good and has a lot of detail when you zoom in. There is some argument to its overall processing, whether or not that's very good compared to previous processing. But if we take a photo here quickly, let me rotate it sideways, take another photo. And if we go into that photo and zoom way in, the detail's just really incredible. Of course, we have the macro modes and everything else. And I'd say my favorite thing about this is the video mode. I use this camera for a lot of video. When I'm outside, I don't really bring a mirrorless camera with me anymore. I have nice Sony mirrorless cameras, but I prefer to use the iPhone because it's easy and most people really like the look of it. The only thing I really am not crazy about this year is the overall HDR video that you get out of it. You do have to change that a little bit and color grade it to get what you might want it to look like. But in most cases, it looks really great, especially if you're using ProRes. The one complaint there is we still have Lightning or AirDrop to get ProRes off the phone. So if you've got these huge 100 gigabyte files, oftentimes it will take a long time to get it off the phone. In fact, with the current storage available, it says I have 11 minutes of recording. And if we take a look at the storage, this uses a huge amount of storage just to record. If we go into the iPhone storage, give it a moment, you'll see I'm only using 108 gigabytes of 256, but that still only gives me 11 minutes of record time. So over 100 gigabytes of usage just to get that much footage. So typically I would recommend against ProRes with USB-C, maybe with iPhone 15. That would make it much, much easier. Also, the forward-facing camera is really great this year with autofocus. I use it in a lot of videos for intros and outros because it looks great, and most people think it looks great, especially on YouTube. If you blow it up to a large screen, the quality's not fantastic, but it's very good and definitely usable for anything online with YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, or anything else. Now, when it comes to the speakers, at the top we have a speaker that is a little different than what we had before, and at the bottom, of course, we have our normal speakers. One thing I wanted to point out, though, is that when my wife switched from her iPhone 12 Pro to the 14 Pro, she actually thought the speakers sounded worse. So I thought I'd play the same video from one of my comparisons and have you take a listen to see what you think about the overall quality compared to the 12 Pro versus the 14 Pro. So let's go to the same video here. It's a 14 Pro Max versus 13 Pro Max comparison, and I'll just play the same clip starting with the 12 Pro. So based off of that, the speakers on the 12 Pro and the 14 Pro are very similar, but there's definitely a little bit of a difference. I would say both have great stereo sound, but let me know which one you think sounds best in the comments below. With daily use, the 14 Pro is really a pleasure to use with the dynamic island. If maybe we play a song here, I'll just turn it down, play a song, Swipe home, it goes into the dynamic island. That's something I really appreciate. It's a nice thing to have. I wouldn't say it's a reason to run out and buy the phone, but I like that it's there. We can tap, go into the song, swipe home, go back home, and then it's just sort of an area to give us notifications and have a little bit more information in an elegant way, as well as hide the Face ID and camera sensor. So I really like this more than the notch, although that's very subjective. However, one thing is the dynamic island does cut into some YouTube videos. So if we go back into that same video and I rotate here, you may have already noticed that. So it's cutting into the video here slightly on the left, depending on how wide the video is. So if it's an ultra wide video, of course you can see it there as I zoom in, but if it's an ultra wide video, it will cut into the video a little bit. If it's a 16:9 video, you won't see it. So it really depends on the footage there. Now, as far as overall speed and performance, well, the speed is great. It's got the A16 Bionic and still 6 gigabytes of RAM, which it says 5.51 gigabytes in Geekbench, but speed is so fast, you really don't notice much. There's been a few glitches here and there with iOS 16, but most of the time, everything's nice and fast. Whether you're just simply loading the App Store here, it's loading from Wi-Fi, or maybe you're loading a game. It just seems to be really fast overall, which is great. And it doesn't seem to produce a whole lot of heat. With the new processor that's in here, it's a little bit smaller with a 4nm process. It doesn't generate as much heat as before. Of course, you'll get a little bit of heat as all processors generate heat as they're using electricity and working hard. And the same is true when you're charging and things like that. That's just natural heat, but it doesn't seem to get overly hot. As far as overall reception with 5G and Wi-Fi, well, the antennas in this are quite good. We have a Qualcomm modem that's been upgraded since the 13 Pro, and if I turn off Wi-Fi, you'll see it will jump over to 5G, and I have T-Mobile, and speeds are pretty good. Of course, it's very carrier dependent, whether it's T-Mobile, Verizon, or AT&T in the United States, or someone else around the world. So, of course, there's a lot of factors that go into this. But as I run a speed test here, you'll see that we're getting about, well, now we're getting over 20 megabits per second down. It's bouncing between 17 and 20 depending on where you are. Sometimes if I go outside, I'll get much better speeds and really good upload speeds, but it's very dependent where I am and of course who your carrier is, how close you are to a cell tower and more. But I've had no reception issues really other than bugs within iOS 16. As far as Wi-Fi, I really haven't had any issues there. Some of that's dependent on your Wi-Fi router, of course, but reception seems to be pretty good overall. I will say that in my tests against different phones, Android phones, it's still not as good Wi-Fi-wise as having maybe an S22 Ultra nearby. They, for some reason, get a little bit better speed in my tests, but that just has to do with your overall Wi-Fi. Nothing you're going to actually really recognize a difference in, especially if you're just watching video. It's more if you were downloading or uploading huge files. As far as if you should wait maybe for iPhone 15 instead of picking up the 13 Pro, well, that really depends. Do you have a 13 Pro already? Maybe you have a 12 Pro. Overall speed is not a huge difference here. Mostly it's the screen that's different. So if you're wanting a big redesign, typically every 3 years, Apple fully redesigns the phone. We expect that with the iPhone 15 with maybe a periscope zoom camera, an upgraded main camera, maybe 8K video, and a new design with a curved back. All of those things are rumored for iPhone 15, and of course that's about, well, 9 months off at this point. It just depends on what you want to wait for. If you have a phone you're happy with, stick with it and see what Apple does next, or wait for the latest deal because you could get it at a discount sometimes with your local carrier. I would say if you want the latest and greatest, pick it up. If you don't, wait for the 15, see what Apple has to offer then, as that's when we should get the major update. I don't think you're going to see much of a difference with speed. The major issue with iPhone right now is probably iOS updates if they're buggy for you. Once Apple sorts those out as we get further along into iOS 16, the experience should improve greatly, and then of course iOS 17 will be sometime in June, shown to developers, and that will be out into September with the iPhone 15. So all of those things are things to factor in, but the 14 Pro is a great phone. I'm enjoying it. My wife really likes it over the 12 Pro, and she really has no complaints. I ask her what she thinks of it, and she says it's a great phone. She doesn't think about it. It works, does what she wants, and the same is true for me. I use it as a video camera all the time, and it just works, and I'm really happy with it overall. If you have a 14 Pro or you're considering it, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, or maybe you decided to go with a 14 Pro Max or something else, or kept an older phone. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Of course, I'll link the wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.